Hey, what's going on, guys? It is 2017 and I am back with a fixed computer and ready to start making a lot more videos. If you do want a channel update, please stick around to the end of the video where I'll be talking about things a little bit. But for right now, let's get right into it. This is the rally video. Alright, so for this video, I'm going to be splitting it into three separate chunks. The first being Xtreme Off Road, the second being more traditional rally, and then the third and final category is going to be how to tackle those off-road drift zones. What I'm going to do is just go into how to tune, how to modify, and how to drive for each of those three sections. So let's get started here with the Xtreme Off Road. Alright, so for this section here I will of course be talking about the Xtreme Off Road class, but these suggestions also apply to the off-road buggies and just standard off-road class, basically because it's the same driving style between the three. Now my favorite off-road car hands down is the Warthog. This thing handles like a dream, it looks cool. Who doesn't love the Warthog? But that being said, you can't modify anything on it, and it basically comes out of the box pretty well tuned. So for this video, I'm actually going to be using the Ford F100, just because I'm able to show you guys a lot more about how to drive this car. So one thing to note that I think is really important in this game, and a lot of people tend to get out of hand with, is if you're just doing single player racing or just driving around in the open world, it really doesn't matter how fast your car is because the AI is always going to adjust around you. So that being said, it really just comes down to how you feel in the car, and I'll get back to that in a minute here. The first thing I'm going to do is a drivetrain swap, and this might be a bit of a contested point, but I like all of my off-road vehicles to be all-wheel drive. The reasoning for this is because all you sacrifice is a little bit of weight. You'll notice it goes up I think 174 pounds, but it gives you complete control over how much power goes to the front and rear wheels, which I think is a huge benefit, definitely worth it for the extra not even 200 pounds. Now as for tires, for Xtreme Off Road, buggies, and normal off road, I do max out the tire width. I don't touch rim size, and that's pretty much where I leave it. You can put on other wheels if you want. Everything else I'm going to max out. There's really no downside to having a faster transmission, and it just unlocks the tuning options for you. Basically for all the off-road vehicles, if it has to do with braking or handling, just max it out. I see no reason not to, it's really only a benefit. However, when it comes to power, it does get a little more interesting. A lot of people tend to just max out power because hey, why not? But I'm going to suggest that you don't, because adding power basically by definition decreases your handling. So I'm going to just do the intake and the displacement right now, as well as the flywheel. This is definitely enough power to start. If you do feel like the car is just slugging along, feel free to add more power, but I definitely wouldn't start with max power. I'd start at the bottom and move up from there. So now that that's all taken care of, let's get into the tuning. We'll start of course with the tire pressure. Pretty simple here. I like to keep things around 25. With the trucks I do end up getting a little bit lower. For now we'll just put things both at 24.5. The most important thing here though is to just keep them similar. If you do want to change it, don't change it too much. Now we are going to skip right over gearing and go straight into alignment. I will get back to gearing though at the end. Negative 0.5 is actually a pretty good place to start, but I am going to turn it up just a little bit, just because I usually end up doing that on my final tunes. If you do want to turn things down, definitely bring the rear down closer to 0, but don't make them too different from each other, especially with an all-wheel drive car. Now for toe, you can do a little bit of front toe out and a little bit of rear toe in. For now I'm just going to do that toe in though. And for caster, I don't like to put this too high, but I like to start high and just bring it down from there. So I'm going to start at 6, but I'm probably going to end up actually bringing it down to around 5.5. Now for the anti-roll bars as well as the springs, I'm actually going to be using the formula that I had previously brought up in my tuning video. So if you do want to check that out, I'll leave a link here in the video. For now though, I am just going to plug in the numbers just to get through this a little bit faster. Now the formula that I use just gives a pretty good base tune that compensates for the weight distribution of each car, but keep in mind for rally you do want things to be a little bit softer, so I will definitely be bringing it down from here. This just gives me a good baseline. For the spring stiffness, I will definitely be using that same formula, but again, keep in mind things will definitely be moving more towards the soft side. While I'm tuning this though, I do want to bring up kind of an interesting point. A lot of people tend to get it in their head that with rally you want everything in the suspension to be as soft as possible, and that's really just not true. You still want everything to be as stiff as possible per the road conditions. It's just that the road conditions happen to be a lot different. So I definitely like to start with a stiff car and move it in increments towards the soft side, and that always ends up giving me a much better tune compared to if I had just made everything really soft from the start. This same rule applies for ride height. People tend to make their rally cars as high as possible because they think that lifting the car is better, and that's just not the case. You still want the car to be as low as possible in rally, it's just that the lowest possible happens to be higher up because of the differing road conditions. So what I'm going to do is bring the slider to the low end and then move it up 10 notches. It just makes a good place to start, but I will probably be moving things up higher from there. Now for the damping, the rebound stiffness tends to actually be tuned quite well, but the bump stiffness always seems to be a little bit low. So what I'm going to do is move it to just a little bit more than 50% of the rebound stiffness. Now for the front, that's going to mean about 2.8. For the rear, that's going to be about 2. This is definitely something worth playing with. I usually end up bringing things more towards the stiff side, just because it makes the handling feel a bit more consistent. That being said, it is actually generally easier to drive the car with a soft bump stiffness. Now as for Aero, I obviously don't have these options unlocked, and you probably won't either depending on which truck you're driving. If you do though, just move things over to cornering. Top speed really isn't going to make that much of a difference in rally. As for braking, it's good to keep a 50-50 balance between the front and the rear. I wouldn't worry about this too much. However, for the braking pressure, it's good to actually turn this up a little bit, especially if you have ABS turned off and you're doing this in the snow. So I'm going to keep things at 110, and I probably won't touch it from here. Now let's move over to differential, because this is where most of your tuning is actually going to be done. Again, with the off-road trucks, the default settings are actually not that bad, especially for front and rear acceleration and deceleration. So for now, I'm going to leave them where they are. If you do want more of an in-depth explanation as to what these settings do, head over to my previous tuning video. For now, I'm going to head down to the differential balance, and this is where all the magic happens. This setting right here is where you're going to be spending most of your time tuning, because this has the biggest effect on cornering for an all-wheel drive car. I like to keep this very rear-wheel drive biased, so I usually start around 80% and then I fine-tune it from there. It usually ends up anywhere between 70 and 85%. But for now, let's leave that right at 80 and go back to the gearing. The first thing you're going to notice on that gearing graph is that 5th and 6th gear aren't even on it, which means they basically are useless to me. So the first thing I'm going to do is change that final drive ratio so that all of the gears are on the graph, which means I can actually get some use out of them all. The second thing I'm going to do is, if you'll notice my top speed, it's at 174.2, and I really don't think I'm ever going to hit that in a rally race, so I'm actually going to bring it down a little bit to a more reasonable top speed that I think I might actually get close to hitting. Because rally is so technical and involves a lot of elevation change and cornering, you want your gears to be a little bit closer together so you're always staying in a power band. So around 165 is a good place to leave it at. I might end up adjusting that later, but for now, the only other thing I want to do is make first and second a little bit longer, which means towards the speed side. And what that does is just prevent you from spinning out in those lower gears. It gives you a little bit more range. And with that said, that's pretty much all there is to gearing. So let's hop out onto my little test track and we'll give it a run. So you're going to notice here that while I'm doing this little test course, I'm going to throw up some notes on the screen, and this is basically how I tune every car. I find a good spot to test the car, and then as I'm doing each run, I make some mental notes of what's good and what's bad about the car, and then I retune from there, and then I drive the course again, tune again, and rinse and repeat until I'm really happy with the feel of the car. So for right now, I'm going to shut up and focus on the driving, but I'll see you at the bottom of this run. Alright, and there we have it. So the first thing I noticed was definitely that there was too much oversteer. And this is going to mean that I want to take that differential balance and move it more towards front wheel drive. I had it at 80%. I think I'm going to try it at between 73 and 75. The gearing was pretty good, but there was a little bit of a dead spot between second and third, so I want to try and close that gap and stay in a power band there. There was good brake balance, the tire pressure felt great, the suspension stiffness was pretty good, but I definitely think it needs to be softened up a little bit. And as for my stability, both in a straight line and in cornering, that felt pretty good, so I'm going to leave my alignment where it is. So the only things I'll be changing here are the differential bias. I'm going to see if I can work on the gearing a little bit, and then I'm going to soften up the suspension. And that's really all there is to it. With that being said, let's move on to the second section, which is Classic Rally. I don't want to repeat myself too much here, so I'm going to be using this Subaru Impreza, which I've already tuned pretty well to my liking, and I'm just going to be going over and explaining some of the differences between the rally trucks and the rally cars. So starting with the modifications, this car has somewhere around 530 horsepower, which is kind of my Goldilocks zone. Any more and it just gets a little bit too ridiculous, and any less it just feels a little bit sluggish. I definitely have room to go in both directions here. If I feel like I need more or less power, I usually just modify the turbo. And that's really all there is for power. Again, with the trucks, the platform and handling and drivetrain, I just max all of that out. As for tire width, this is a bit of an annoying point for me. In real life, having tires that are too wide can actually be a pretty big deficit, but it doesn't seem like Forza physics work the same way, so it's definitely something worth playing around with, but I tend to find that even for rally, having wider tires just feels best. And speaking of tires, let's get right into tuning. You'll see I have tire pressure right here at 25. I set it here actually in the beginning. I played with it back and forth, but it seemed to be the best. As for gearing, you'll notice all the gears are on the graph, but I'm not using that full top speed. I could go faster if I wanted to, but I just never go over 175, so there's no need for it. With the alignment, I do have a little bit more camber just because this is a pretty powerful car. Anti-roll bars, I used that formula that is in my tuning video. And with the springs, you'll notice that I actually set these really soft. And the reason for that is because with those rally trucks, they're much higher off the ground and there's a lot more suspension travel. But with a car that's lower to the ground, you need to compensate by having softer suspension and better damping. So you'll see that in the damping window as well. But for this, I really just kind of went by feel on it, and it's pretty much the same story with the ride height. Now for damping, I would recommend, like with the trucks, keeping your rebound stiffness about where it is from the factory. However, you'll notice that my bump stiffness is set really soft. And this is another situation where with rally cars, you need to compensate for that low suspension travel. But this is something that has a pretty decent effect on your car's handling, so I'd recommend playing with it. For Aero, I do have that front splitter attached, so I have that fully set to cornering. I would recommend getting it if you have it. It does make a pretty noticeable difference in your turn-in response. And with the brakes, pretty much the same story as the trucks here. Nothing much to say. 50 and 110 is a good spot to leave it. Again, with the differential, the acceleration and deceleration settings are pretty decent from the factory, so I have left these as is. But with the center balance, I have that, again, much more towards rear bias. Not quite as much as with that truck. This is a little bit too high, I think. Between 60 and 75 is probably a good spot for it. And that's pretty much all there is to tuning the rally cars. I will do another run down that same hill I did the truck on just to show you how the car handles. And then we'll move on to the drift zones. Alright, so that wasn't too bad. Let's move right on to drift zones. Now, I had to touch on this one, at least just for a minute, because it actually is a huge bummer for me. I wish I could tell you that, a really cool Subaru Impreza all-wheel drive drift build is what got you the best score on off-road drift zones, but it's just not true. What I'm doing right now is literally just taking my normal tarmac drift car. I raised it up like 0.2 inches, and that's it. I didn't change the tires, I didn't do anything. And I'm pretty sure on this drift zone, I'm still within the top 300 in the world with this exact car. I tried so hard to get an all-wheel drive car with a higher score than this so I could flesh this section out more, but if you want the trick, this is all there is to it. And with that said, that's about all there is to the video. Thank you so much for watching and sticking around to the end. I did say I was going to give a bit of a channel update, and this is something I would really love to hear your input on, no matter who you are. If you made it till the end of this video and you want to keep seeing more content from me, I'd love to hear your input. So basically what I have to say is the support and the viewership has been unreal for me. I definitely was not expecting this, and I really want to keep making content for you. As you can see on my channel, I'm really just getting started with this whole YouTube thing and figuring it out as I go, but I really enjoy it and I want to keep making more. So I really enjoy the tutorial format and I want to keep doing more tutorials for sure, but as for Forza, there isn't too much left I can do. So keeping with the car theme, I actually own a drift car and an amateur rally car in real life, and I'm considering buying another drift car pretty soon here. So I'm wondering if you guys would be interested in seeing some real world tuning guides, building guides, modification, basically just the stuff I've been doing in this game, but also in real life. I would definitely still like to keep making video game content as well. Dirt 4 just got announced today, so I'm going to love playing and making videos on that. And if anything else comes out for Forza 3, I'll probably make another video on that as well. But yeah, I'm wondering if you guys would be interested in seeing some more real-world car modifying stuff, because that is definitely a direction I would love to take this channel. That being said, I'm not a mono gamer. I actually play pretty much all the games that are out there, not just racing games. So if you would like to see different video game content, just go ahead and let me know in the comments below just where you'd like to see the channel go. Thanks again for watching, guys, and please leave that feedback. I really want to hear it.